A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago. Now get ready, because it seems that I have to address something very serious. As George A. Romero would put it, when there's no room in the underworld, the dead will walk the earth. And I feel like that it seems to be more relevant now than ever, because after all, what he did for the very first time, his original cult classic of 1968, Night of the Living Dead. This is, of course, what basically is set apart from almost every other zombie movie in existence. And it's for very good reason. This was basically the original black and white film, despite being late 60s, of course, that actually did so much more than what you could have possibly anticipated from other such sources. And with all that's happened so far in reference to zombie-related films, there's been tons and tons of them. But hardly any of which have actually been as truthful, as serious, as creepy as the original Night of the Living Dead. What we have here is a story. The story of a woman and a brother. They go out to visit a grave, driving a red Pontiac. Well, of course, this is just in reference to the colorized version, which came out much later, but the point is, they go to visit a grave. The brother makes this weird joke about saying, "They're coming for you," which really is hilarious, but it gets serious really quickly, because the horror immediately kicks in after the joke. So it really is a surprise when you think about it. A person comes out of nowhere, limping, raising his arms up, and he basically knocks him over. So right off the bat, we are being subjected to the horror at hand. A guy is basically attacking these two people who were just going out to visit their deceased relative. So it basically makes you wonder, what happened to the person? What happened to him? Why is he going and attacking people? Why is he walking like he's very badly injured in the legs? Or maybe he woke out of a coma and is learning to walk again. Well, you know what? This is basically a part of a little thing that it's been happening in movies back in the day, called mystery. And mystery was a huge deal back in the day, because filmmakers of all sorts really wanted to make the horror, the suspense, feel and sound more authentic than possible. The way that George Romero himself was actually able to put this together was by simply bringing in whatever people he could find. If I had to put a few good examples together, these actors, people that he managed to find, Bill Heinzman and brothers Richard and Rudy Ricci. Those are basically just a few examples of the many people that portray themselves as walking ghouls, as referred canonically. Because back in the day, they did not want the term zombie to get out right away. They wanted to make it seem like it actually was something that was bound to be a thing in real life. Though, of course, everything is always choreographed and put together with some of the best possible treatment in terms of both effects and visualization on what zombies are actually supposed to be. With many decades of innovation and technological advancements, however, the zombie has definitely progressed through being a slow-moving, walking, and moaning body with arms that reach about and grab whatever's in their way, to an utterly terrifying monster that creates some of the creepiest noises that can ever be portrayed from the human mouth and throat. And of course, can actually run. So when you get down to it, after more than 50 years of innovation, it's hard to imagine exactly what actually could have been like back then. Because today's zombies definitely would have been scarier than the ones we saw back then. In 1968, if a zombie from today were to go back then, it would be more than just a nightmare to every kid who would be vulnerable to watch this. But that was sort of the beauty of it. The beauty of being able to understand the horror, the nightmare that is basically the zombie itself. The combination of decomposing flesh, somewhat pale tones, wide open mouths with rotting teeth, undeniably scary noises that come straight out of their throats due to really jargled up vocal cords, the combination of darkened eyes, and of course, the ultimate fear-enticing effect of every zombie, the ability to gorge on human flesh. And in this particular instance, it's not just about the zombies wanting to cause havoc through all of the town that they're invading in, but it's also because of the incredible amounts that come out of nowhere. In this exact instance, what we have here are two people, one of which gets attacked and the other one barely gets out alive. She basically ends up crashing the car at some point, unable to start it, so she has to make it out on foot. Eventually she comes across a farmhouse, which she manages to get inside of. Eventually another man, a guy named Dwayne, a person of color so to speak, also gets inside the house. He manages to lock up the doors and basically goes as far as to come up with the idea to barricade the doors and windows by grabbing whatever wood can be accessible within the house. All the kinds of wood. He even goes for the wood that's underneath a kitchen countertop. So, that really says a lot. And he basically uses every ounce of furniture in the house, from the tables and chairs, to the recliner, to the couch. Everything he could possibly get a hold of, just to bar the doors and windows as much as possible from the zombies so they cannot get inside. And as time passes, they listen on the radio, and they basically elaborate through a broadcast that these are in fact non-human beings. These beings are in fact not human at all to begin with. They appear to be in a trance. They appear to be gorging on people's flesh. The flesh of the living, so to speak. These are in fact beings that are capable of causing fear and a ton of other stuff. After some more time passes, however, though, as soon as they're pretty much finished, a door opens in the house, and a lot of people end up coming out. It turns out that the farmhouse that they're inside actually belongs to a certain family, and these two are basically just house guests who had no idea that there is actually a basement in the building. A basement that actually is a cellar capable of stopping a lot of attacks. Mostly nuclear ones. And considering that this was a time period when the nuclear age was huge and where so many other issues were going on, a lot of houses were basically built to be like doomsday bunkers. Basements of all kinds could serve as a last resort of survival for people if they so choose to want to live. So in this case, an argument breaks out, some other stuff takes place. They eventually discover that zombies do not react well to fire, and eventually they go out and try to deal with this stuff on their own. So, a small group of them tries to get a truck filled up with gas so they can get on over to a town. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work all too well. The truck ends up blowing up into smithereens, flames spewed everywhere. A few of the survivors died in the explosion. And unfortunately for Dwayne, he may be armed to the teeth with a rifle. He was barely able to get back into the house. And the real unfortunate thing is that the rest of the survivors in the cellar, so to speak, they don't make it either. And that's because an unconscious child was lying down on a bench deep in the cellar itself. And apparently, she collapsed into a coma. She basically had a trace of what was infecting those people, turning them into these creatures. And so she became one of them and managed to kill the rest of the survivors. All but Dwayne. And so this basically is where we supposedly come to an end. Thinking that just about everybody has died. Dwayne seems to be the only survivor here. However, this is where we get to the biggest significance as to why the movie serves its current purpose. A large group of cronies, they band together, survivors of all sorts, police and whatnot. They banter together, armed to the teeth with guns of all sorts, weapons of any kind that they could find. They go around hunting every single zombie, anything that moves, until eventually they find the house itself, along with about every single zombie that's there. Dwayne managed to bar himself inside the basement during that night, and when he heard that there was little to no more noise going on upstairs, he basically takes himself out. But not by his own doing. You see, when he exits the basement and realizes that all the zombies are dead, and there's pretty much nothing but live people, real survivors out there, Dwayne gets shot by one of those guys outside with one of their rifles. One shot to the head kills him. The one and only survivor who barred up the house, the man who really thought ahead compared to everybody else and really managed to save himself, did all that for nothing. One shot it took from one of their rifles to kill him. In other words, it is the ultimate branding, on-screen racism at its finest. These guys that have guns in their hands, they do not realize that he was not a zombie, and so they shoot him. Possibly on purpose. So, this is basically the kind of social commentary that still is more than just relevant. Because here in 2022, we are getting a boatload of films that center around the many, many issues that persons of color face on a daily basis. And it doesn't seem to matter exactly what color the skin is, or what kind of personality the person has, or what kind of religion they have, or what kind of holidays they celebrate. Here in 2022, it's mattered much more than ever. In 1968, however, it was a totally different story. Having a person of color portray himself as a main protagonist was something that almost never happened back in the day. It would be a very rare occasion for something like this to happen. And with that in mind, after all these years that have passed, I'm more than glad that we are actually living in a time where this is the kind of thing that's normal. Total empowerment of POC and BIPOC individuals at all costs. It's not only a necessity, but it is in fact there as a reminder that we do need to keep them alive. They are not to die by anybody's hands, especially police. But when it comes to Night of the Living Dead 1968, you're probably wondering what score do I have to give to this. Well, I did give my most recent viewing just a few days ago, so I could have time to talk about it here in this series. So with that in mind, my scoring on this being probably one of the greatest zombie films ever made. One of the best that George Romero has ever created. other than the likes of many of the rest that he's done throughout all of the decades that zombie movies have been around in. My personal favorite of all of which would have to be Day of the Dead 1985. It's just so amazing. It's probably more than a masterpiece in and of itself, but it's a bit more on the rare side compared to everything else that Romero has done. So with that, Night of the Living Dead 1968 gets an 8.8 out of 10.1. The fact that it really outshines so many zombie movies today is one thing, and the fact that most modern zombie movies that nowadays can really allow us to see through the many things that Romero himself originally accomplished. But that's because these movies are old now. A lot of people don't typically look back on these because it's not necessarily seen as mainstream. However, there's lots of people out there who are more than willing to argue about how relevant this film is, and probably many of the other movies that George Romero has done as well. As a matter of fact, there's some articles like Hollywood Reporter. They themselves have actually talked about how Night of the Living Dead 1968 is much more relevant today than it was back then. But let's be real here. Night of the Living Dead is no longer just a singular film. No. Even though it took only $114,000 in 1968 just to make it, and when adjusted for inflation ballpark estimate, it would be well over double that amount. So the thing is, it's a definite classic. A cult classic that is not just seen as a masterpiece by many of us compared to everybody else who might not get the chance to even watch this. But it's there. It's there for us to be reminded on a daily basis. Keep each other calm, steady, and in the right mind in order to get past the apocalypse. Considering what we had been through though, all the years that have passed by, with tons of misfortune, misguidance, and mystifying, undeniably bad stuff. It really is a hefty reminder to tell us zombies may not be the only concern ever again. Well, anyways, thank you very much for watching this. As always, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side if you'd like to see more.